Hi, everyone.
Okay.
Hello? Is that working? No?
No.
No? I'll just yell. I'm good at that. My name is Amy Elias. I'm the director of the UT Humanities Center, and I'm really glad you're here. It is so wonderful to have an in-person event and see all your faces. This is like so great. We have missed you. The UT Humanities Center is a research center on campus that fosters interdisciplinary research and disciplinary research in the arts and humanities. And we run this distinguished visiting lecture series every year, bringing the top scholars in 9 different departmental disciplines. And so today we have a wonderful talk, and I'll let our faculty host introduce our speaker today. But before we get to that, I just want to let you know that on February 28th, coming up next in the series, we have this amazing event happening in coordination with the Department of Art and the Knoxville Museum of Art. And we're going to bring in Chang Tan, who is Assistant Professor of Art History and Asian Studies at Penn State University. And she is a curator, and she is curating an exhibition at the Knoxville Museum of Art called Global Ages. So while that's going on, sorry, I'm running around. While that's going on, you can go see the exhibition, and then we're going to have a panel discussion on campus with 3 of our faculty experts in Asian studies. So I hope you can look us up on our website. This is the UT Humanities Center. You'll be seeing notices and posters on campus. This is a really exciting event, and we hope you can attend. So I'll turn it over to our faculty host today. Thanks for coming.
Okay, do you want to show it? Let's see. Can you hear me? No. Okay, maybe it was off. Maybe no. Yeah, okay, so I have a loud voice, but I'm going to use it anyway. I feel like a rock star. Anyway, thank you so much for coming, and I feel so honored to have Professor Renga here. And first of all, I have to thank the Humanities Center and Elias for having this wonderful series lecture, distinguished lectures, and we've been waiting for Professor Renga to come here. We had to postpone at least 3 times, I think. So it's just wonderful that you finally could make it. And we also want to thank the Department of Modern Foreign Languages, our chair, and my wonderful colleagues, and our section chair, Flavia Brizio. Now, before I actually talk about your astonishing bio, and just I need to, if I may, I want to add a personal note to this presentation, and I feel so honored to have Professor Renga here. Her scholarship inspired me, and I think I'm actually researching television because of you and your books and your articles. So I wanted to personally thank you for enriching our television studies scholarship, because before your writings there was not much in America. So thank you so much.
That's sweet of you.
So I'm going to introduce Professor Renga and give you a little bit of her bio. Of course, she published immensely. It's impossible to list all of her publications, but I've tried. So Professor Renga is Professor of Italian and Dean of Arts and Humanities at Ohio State University. She researches and teaches on Italian film and media studies with a focus on television. She is core faculty in the Film Studies program and affiliated faculty in the Department of Comparative Studies and the Department of Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. In addition to 2 monographs, 1 co-authored book, and an edited volume, she has published over 40 articles and book chapters on Italian cinema and television, Italian popular culture, and modern and contemporary Italian poetry and literature. Her most recent monograph for 2019 is called Watching Sympathetic Perpetrators on Italian Television, Gomorrah and Beyond, and offers the first comprehensive study of recent popular Italian television. And my students of television, I'm sure you remember talking about this in class, right? Building on work in American television studies, audience and reception theory, and masculine studies, Sympathetic Perpetrator examines how and why viewers are positioned to engage emotionally with Italian television anti-heroes. The study is principally interested in the processes at work, both in and around the series, that might prompt viewers across the globe to root for difficult and complex men who do horrible things. Dana is currently working on a book called Casting Stardom, which is a project on casting practices in the US and Italy. It is curious that scant scholarship exists in film and media studies that focuses on casting broadly considered, including casting directors, location, processes, and so on. Indeed, the face beyond the on-screen face is frequently out of the picture. Then hopes that #Casting Stardom aims to remedy this lacuna through contributing a large-scale study of casting processes with particular attention paid to gender labor. The vast majority of casting directors in the US and in Italy are women. And this afternoon, she's going to talk about Italian television abroad. Yes, an announcement, yes. We, the library just have a few books outside this room, a booth with a few books. If you want to check it out, you have to go upstairs and go through the process of.
You can check them out, and then you go to the desk and you can check them out. So there are many books about cinema and Italian scene and so on. So you can take them if you want.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you.
Take my mask off just for the duration of the talk. Thank you so much. That was such a wonderful, wonderful intro, and I really appreciate your words. It's wonderful having you both as colleagues. Thank you, Amy, for hosting this event. It was great to get to know you over lunch, and I look forward to continuing many of our conversations. I looked back at my emails, and I was invited. I think the first conversation started on August 18th of 2019 about coming here, and was delayed as Chiara said several times. It's really great seeing old friends, meeting lovely new folks, and I just want to say that Chiara and Flavia are doing such great things with the Italian program here, and you're just so lucky to have them. I also want to thank Amy Elias of whoever, thank you, you're here, and then also Naren Woolley, Modern Foreign Languages and Literature's wonderful administrative specialist, who was great with all the logistics of my trip. So my talk today on Italian television abroad builds upon the book that Chiara just mentioned, Watching Sympathetic Perpetrators on Italian Television, Gomorrah and Beyond, that treats recent Italian serial television, looking at audiences, their viewing preferences, and understudied topics. There's a lot of work done on it very recently, but not so much a little bit ago, such as acting and performance, with a special attention on how these series were kind of received by viewers in Italy and internationally. So I look kind of around stuff rather than doing specific textual analysis. And I was principally interested in the processes at work in both these, in these and other series that might prompt viewers across the globe to, as Chiara said, to root for horrible, complex men who do horrible, horrible things, but people still want to keep on watching and can't let go. So the fifth, and very sadly, and one of the things about working on TV is spoilers. So I will not spoil anything at all, but it's really hard not to spoil things when you're working on TV. And I just want to ask quickly, has anyone seen any episodes of Gomorrah? Okay, a few of you. Subura? A few, my brilliant friend? Okay, so we have some folks in the audience. So the fifth and final season of the smash hit series Gomorrah dropped on HBO Max exactly 2 weeks ago today. Gomorrah is a transnational hit, thanks for its high production values, contemporary socio-political relevance, intriguing score, and international distribution model. And of course, the mafia is a topic that actually doesn't hurt its popularity. This is one example with how Italian television is no longer confined to national borders. As noted in a recent article in Variety, the global rise of Italian TV series is now in full swing, thanks in great part to the international successes of these and other series, such as Baby, Zero, Summertime, Luna Park, Subura, etc. All of these, this speaks to these series' kind of transnational appeal and growing fan base. Many of Italy's most popular exported series feature alluring and attractive criminal anti-heroes and offer fictionalized accounts on historical events or figures. And this is quite different than a lot of popular American TV, and we can talk about that later. In particular, the Sky and Netflix series, and this is my title of my book, highlight the routine violence of daily life in the mafia, the police worth and politics. Although content is frequently really dark and violence is common, they've made an international name for themselves in presenting Italian tragedy in a format that's visually pleasurable and for many across the globe, like me, highly addictive. And I did binge watch that 5th season of Subura of Gomorrah in one day. Today, I'll look at 3 recent popular Italian television products that have secured a broad viewership in and outside of Italy, programs that premiered on 3 very specifically different platforms. First, I'll discuss the hit series Gomorrah that premiered in 2014 on the Italian paid TV network to an unsurpassed network viewership and address the series' kind of local global appeal. Then I turned towards Italy's first made-for-Netflix series Subura, available in 2017 to Netflix subscribers worldwide. And I'll discuss the series addressed to queer and gay spectators, and here my target is social media. And I'll conclude, the mouse from clicking. I'll spend most of my time providing a counterexample to the hypermasculine worldview in the other 2 series by addressing casting and the creation of what I'm calling authentic stardom in the HBO and Rai co-production My Brilliant Friend that centers on female friendship and whose 3rd season drops on HBO Max just 18 days from today. So you have 18 days to watch series 1 and 2 before you can watch series 3 when it premieres. So with its 5th, and I think Chiara and I were just talking about that, I thought sadly final installment, right? Maybe they should have done another one. Gomorrah is even more popular in and outside of Italy. It's the most watched series in the history of Italian pay TV. Netflix does not share its data unless Netflix wants to share its data. You'll notice this is number 1, but when you ask Netflix, we can talk about that in the QA, purposely hides data. And show rights have been purchased in 119 countries. There's 206 sovereign states in the world, so that's pretty good viewing odds. It's dubbed, by Variety as Italy's answer to The Wire, or Hollywood Reporter, Italy's answer to Breaking Bad. And one reviewer says that now America does not have a lock on quality dramas. So the Gomorrah phenomenon has gone global. Gomorrah is an emblematic program for discussing premium television, the premium television platform Sky, which is like Italy's HBO. The Sky model entails original, innovative, and experimental programming that's cutting edge in its production values, allows from the creative freedom from the best in the business, and speaks to an audience who is attentive to quality and wants to have a unique television experience. Placing audience taste and agency front and center in the viewing encounter recalls what Amanda Lotz defines as the 5 C's in the post-network era, which are choice, control, convenience, customization, and community. More recently, Robinson adds curation when considering increasingly engaged audiences who can fashion their own viewing experiences in the face of an ever-increasing onslaught of different types of streaming programs and available programming. So Sky creates material that's methodically conceived, executed, scheduled, and marketed. And the boutique nature of the Sky lineup maximizes what 2 Italian television scholars, Luca Barra and Massimo Scaglioni, call a return on investment, while inciting viewers who are interested in programming that diverges from the more mainstream prototypes that are available on the 2 competitors. So Sky shows are, for the most part, in line with the series dubbed as quality television, the reinvention of HBO with Oz in 97, Sex and the City in 98. Any Sopranos fans out there? Okay, Sopranos in 1999. Think of It's Not TV, it's HBO. And I just want to say that I'm employing the term quality as kind of a discursive assemblage or a discursive category that can be used to kind of group different types of series together, and not as a labeler of saying some shows are better than others. And the quality label is kind of highly debated in television studies, but it can be applied to programs made over the last 20 years that generally have high production values, are innovative in terms of casting, dialogue, soundtrack, and storylines, and are narratively complex. Such original programming engages viewers who are hungry for sophisticated content and who in turn can feel sophisticated, I feel this way when I watch stuff, as a result from engaging with quality content. And Gomorrah is characteristic of Sky's quality model, which favors this question of empathetic relativism or the viewer's willingness to align themselves with villainous men and women, high production values, naturalistic performance style, and stylistic integrity, urban settings, and interesting casting and musical choices. And these tropes are familiar to American series such as The Sopranos, The Wire, Mad Men, Breaking Bad, etc. And it's noteworthy that Sky Programming is interested in revisiting Italian history. All of the Sky series and miniseries with a focus on criminality, looking at criminal antiheroes, offer fictionalized events of real life events dating from the 70s to the present. For example, the focus of the Gomorrah is the Gomorrah or the Mafia of Naples, in and around Naples and Campania. So in addition to placing a focus on criminal actual crime networks that brought about and in some cases still cause grief, pain, and national instability, many Sky programs unambiguously place good-looking anti-heroes at the narrative core. And this isn't the case if you think of Breaking Bad. Mad Men's an exception. We can talk about that, but things like, Breaking Bad and The Sopranos and others, Italy's different. Sky programs are replete with well-developed and complex anti-heroes who are depicted in sympathetic terms. The men that feature in these programs conform to a similar, what I'm calling like a sympathetic perpetrator template or identikit. They experience loss, a trauma, or an injustice at a younger age. They're charismatic, good at what they do. They're surrounded by friends and family. They're sexually attractive to a variety of women, and they have a sense of inner justice, although frequently a very morally perplexing one. Also, with one exception that's clear in Gomorrah, which I won't talk about, but I'm happy to write you separately about because it's a massive spoiler, they're less bad than their friends and enemies, and they experience deep homosocial relationships with their criminal peers. This is especially the case of Gomorrah focal anti-hero Ciro. So in one reviewer's words, internationally there is a fixation with Ciro, even more so in Italy, and that's the case in my own household. I can tell you that it's a general topic of conversation in my home. Italian sympathetic perpetrators are no longer confined to national borders. And Sky and Netflix, we'll talk about in a moment, focusing on national criminality are plentiful and growing. Mafias such as the Gomorrah, Cosa Nostra, and 'Ndrangheta are culturally specific while also global in nature. They've pervaded almost every facet of cultural life, and these are just some headlines that I found in the last few months. So you can Google the mafias all over the headlines all the time. I just chose, I think all of these are in English, or no, there's a few in Italian. So this is interesting as Italy's mafias are deadly, lucrative, adaptable, and international structures. They've pervaded almost all elements of cultural life and have left tens of thousands of victims. And so a daily look at news reveals stories of corruption, clan wars, drug raids, homicides, which are mafia related. And one example was really funny. This mobster put a cooking show, I don't know if you heard about this, on YouTube, and he was caught because someone noticed his tattoo, and he was hiding in South America. So this just happened a few months ago. So the average person living in Italy is no doubt aware that the mafia exists and is a massive problem. Also, Dom Holdaway notes that the recent turn to Italian quality mafia films and TV, he's just talking about film, but I think it counts towards TV, signals not only a shift in the social meaning of the mafia, but moreover, that this subject matter has affirmed itself as a profitable and exportable image of Italy's dark side. So it's kind of like the Catholic Church, you think of like the Vatican, opera and all these things. So now the mafia is being exported as well. And the same is true with Italian mafia TV programs, where Italian mafias are not associated with Italian cultural trauma. And there are some exceptions with this we can talk about later, but with an Italian cultural heritage that's profitable and exportable. I find it fascinating, at least, that spectators enjoy re-experiencing Italy's painful recent past and present in the safety and comfort of their own homes in forms that invite compulsive viewing habits. At the same time, protests against mafia-related television programs are common in Italy. And I'm interested, except with one example with Subura, there were not any protests. And I thought a lot about why. I'm interested in the debates that arise from the trend in recent Italian TV to represent criminals in a glamorized light when these fictional characters are based upon historical figures who killed and wounded real people in recent history. And these are just some protests against Gomorrah. So, I lost my pages. Okay. Oh, Sky and Netflix have been successful in producing local crime content with an appeal to global audiences. And in particular, they imported a model into Italy that had worked well and had attracted audiences in the US. Series featuring likable criminal anti-heroes. And they also added their own twist by making them conventionally handsome. And the popularity of a program like Gomorrah results from several factors. For example, it offers viewers a window into Italy's tainted history. And this is just when the season 5 was coming out, I was really struck by some of these. This is, these are Anglophone ads about this is what you're going to watch. And it really speaks to the phenomenon of Gomorrah. It offers viewers a window into Italy's tainted history in this pleasurable narrative form. It focuses on organized crime, which is a topic with selling power, attracting audiences across the globe while speaking to national audiences. Lots of brand narratives like romance, coming of age, and family drama. It's very complex with interesting character development and kind of fosters viewer alignment with these kind of despicable men that audiences kind of flock to despite all of these other things they're doing in their lives. And the emphasis in these programs on the perpetually absolved and attractive anti-hero shifts the focus from national tragedies to individual stories that have a broad appeal outside of Italy's borders. And this is especially the case. These are some other Sky programs that some of you might have seen. 000, which is a joint Amazon production, is an adaptation of Roberto Saviano's expose about the international cocaine trade and stars Gabriel Byrne, and is shot in English, French, Italian, Spanish, and Wolof. Devils, and the second series of Devils was just announced, stars Patrick Dempsey and Alessandro Borghi. And I'm obsessed with Alessandro Borghi, so if anyone else likes him, you could use the hashtag Borghi Studies on social media to promote the study of Alessandro Borghi as a star persona. And also The Young and the New Pope, this HBO Sky co-production with a star cast. So with international cast and global storyline, Sky has made quite the business of serial perpetrators, both in Italy and internationally. So now I want to move on to Netflix to talk about Subura, which was Italy's, as I said, first made for Netflix original production and premiered globally on Netflix in October of 2017, where this is super interesting. The second season dropped on February 22nd, 2019, just 3 days before former mayor of Rome, and it takes place in Rome. So if anyone has been to Rome or wants to go to Rome, there's beautiful images of Rome throughout the series. So the former mayor was sentenced to 6 years of prison on corruption charges regarding his involvement in events that inspire the narrative of Subura. So the actual mayor is arrested on crime that Subura is engaging with. And this is relating to Mafia Capitale, or the mafia of the capital, of Italy. And sadly, the final season premiered last year, but if anyone's seen it, I'm hopefully that there might be some sort of spin-off, because the ending was so wacky that I think something else has to happen. It was very odd. So it's also super interesting because the series is a prequel to the 2015 film and novel. Both are the same name, and it takes place in 2008, focusing on this machinations around the corrupt land deal in the seaside town of Ostia outside of Rome. And players include corrupt politicians and members of the clergy and others tied to the Vatican, or to organized crime syndicates battling for power in the city. However, I think the series' main narrative focus is 3 young men as they bond and clash and bond again as they kind of come of age in the streets of Rome. Netflix came out in Italy in 2015, where it was promoted with the affable hashtag Ciao Netflix. It was very welcoming. And publicity campaigns strove to attract subscribers with the promise of unprecedented choice and convenient access to high quality films and TV programs, many of which were original content. And as you probably know, whenever Netflix enters a new market, a new country market, they always dedicate between 10 to 20% of their content to original programming to speak specifically to local audiences. And then they import a lot of popular programming, you know, from Grey's Anatomy to whatever they can buy for that country. Let's see. Lima's 2015 film Subura premiered in theaters in October, right when Netflix launched, and streamed on Netflix the next day, which now is totally normal because of the pandemic, but in 2015 was like a massive good idea to get viewers to kind of think of Netflix as a thing that they wanted to, you know, to subscribe to. And then it also launched this marketing campaign 2 years before the series premiered. So this was all from 2015, that focused on the trio, Aureliano Adami, Alberto Spadino Anacletti, and Lele Gabriele Marchire, and focusing primarily on Aureliano, most likely because of Alessandro Borghi, hashtag Borghi Studies, star status. And right there was kind of a blossoming star status. We really did focus on like kind of the bond between this pair. And what I'd like to focus on with Subura is marketing and fan culture around Spadino, who represents, I believe, the first ever gay sympathetic character, a perpetrator protagonist on Italian TV. And he's represented in positive terms, especially in the first 2 seasons. That prompt viewers kind of to relate to him internationally around the world, regardless of gender. Before Spadino, I've read tens and 20s of thousands of comments in all the languages I can about Spadino, so I'm happy to talk about it. It's really interesting. And before Spadino, most gay characters on Italian TV were cast in minor roles, represented in negative terms, stereotyped, killed off, etc. Instead, Spadino is a central protagonist with a developed arc. He suffers, loves, cries, is funny and good looking, has very interesting fashion sense. I always pull my students on who's funniest. Before I started my dean job, I taught a Mafia Movies course every semester at Ohio State and had about 500 students on it. It's crazy, students in it. And they all voted that Spadino was the funniest of all of the Italian Mafia characters. On social media, Netflix is quite open to foregrounding Spadino's sexuality, drawing attention to the Spadino-Aureliano bond. And on Valentine's Day, which is coming up, so just about 3 years ago, Netflix posted this to the series Facebook page that's modeled after publicity material some of you might have seen, Call Me By Your Name, the Luca Guadagnino transnational kind of queer coming-of-age film that features Spadino and Aureliano staring out towards the viewers under the title, Call Me By Your Name, Aurelia, which is Aureliano kind of Roman dialect. And endorsements on the poster include like the love story that succeeded in moving even the coldest hearts, and it's almost better than a carbonara, which recalls an episode in the first season where the pair's bond is most palpable as they share a thermal bath and dine on a plate of pasta. And these moments are favorites of fans throughout the world who really do ship for the pair. There also exist several paratexts, including promotional material by Netflix and fan videos in Italy and internationally featuring the pair. The pasta, the moment, sorry, from the episode 1, from the season 1. So these paratexts are quite common, and user comments are incredibly positive. And I'd love to play my favorite from October 21st, 2017, when Netflix posted a video called Word is Spreading that Anacletti and Adami are getting into trouble to the official Facebook and Twitter sites. And it always makes me laugh, and I watched it tons of times, and I thought you all might enjoy it. It's 48 seconds long, super short. Oh, no, this is Spadino Dance. This is one.
That's good too.
And I'm holding on to
And the little like Netflix, I'm sorry, Netflix description is beyond romance. So, and I have those translated for you. So International Patrimony, who are Romeo and Juliet, a couple of the year, right? I just ship for them. And I find International Patrimony really interesting because it's both local and global, right? Patrimonial and also international. And I contacted each of these people to see if they were real. And they are all real. And I said, did you know, I just found them on Twitter or whatever. And I'm like, did you know that Netflix used this in their promotional video? And they were like, no, I'm so honored and excited. And then I talked to my friend who works in about like, is it legal that they did that? You know, I think it's just a really interesting question, but it's just a really interesting community of kind of people working in social network theory around these kinds of questions. You know, clear in the video, Netflix is not at all shy about drawing attention to Spadino's sexuality and the erotic nature of the relationship. So Aureliano's straight, Spadino's gay, and just does so with kind of underlying humor and lightness. And there's 18 of these moments, the majority of which they laugh, bond, look meaningfully at one another, enjoy a plate of pasta, or soak in a thermal bath. In a few other clips, you see Spadino kind of breaking down or wistfully, I love that one, smelling Aureliano's sweaters. And we have in one moment kind of the perfunctory, Aureliano is a gay when he's in bed with his girlfriend. And there's a bunch of other videos like this. So if anyone's interested, it might just be me. Just send me an email and I'll send them to you. I consulted thousands, as I said, like tens of thousands of posts, fan blogs, and fan videos relating mainly to the first season, and clear in the reception of the series, fans worldwide root for Spadino and endorse this bond, which I think opens up really interesting channels for a more revolutionary representation and representation and reception practice of the series' queer position. And to cite one final paratextual example, oh, I forgot about my cover. In the series, Spadino regularly dances. In these moments, he feels the most himself and at ease, as if he's in the process of kind of negotiating his incredibly conflicted identity as a gay repressed Sinti mobster. Fans took note, as did Netflix, which released this very short promo video called Spadino Dance, which I'll play for you right now. And add the translations in a second. So both the character Spadino and the actor, Giacomo Ferrara, take part in the video, I think, which opens up the address even more broadly because you have a straight actor and a gay character. And the lightness of the dance moments in a dark series and in materials around it are interested in terms of the theorist Fiona Buckland's writings on impossible dance in club culture and queer world making. And that she argues that moments of improvised dance in queer club culture might help individuals, she said, transcend consciousness through dance. But the difference here is that their, dance is not improvised, although it's meant to seem as such in the series. And so the Spadino storyline, mainly in season 1, marks a revolution in the representation of LGBTQ+ characters in Italian TV programming. At the same time, Subura engages viewers internationally who turn to Netflix and Amazon Prime, which developed a reputation for producing serial dramas featuring sympathetic LGBTQ plus characters. And with Subura, Netflix uses dependable production and marketing strategies to hook a very large international viewership. With its overt queer and gay subtext, Subura is pioneering in the representation of sex and gender on Italian small screens and appeals to viewers outside and inside of Italy. But at the same time, the focus on the exploits of a criminal band of brothers who attempt to make it big in Rome might draw in fans of a series like Romanzo Criminale, and this is a series from 2008-9 that kind of launched the whole Sky phenomenon of these quality TV programs. So appealing to local audiences, and I think that's a pretty novel marketing strategy. So I want to now turn to the popular HBO Rai co-production My Brilliant Friend that also secured a very broad viewership in and outside of Italy. When the trailers, posters, and publicity photos emerged for the series, and it's based on a series of incredibly popular novels, the Neapolitan novels by Elena Ferrante, there's 4 of them, and their reception, they're like read in every book club, they're translated, I don't know how many languages they're translated in, like tons. So these novels have already traveled well beyond the borders. So, and I'd read them before the series came out. So when the trailer, posters, and publicity photos emerged for the series, I probably, like many, was totally struck by the faces of the girl and adolescent performers. I'm like, who are they? How did the actors get the part? How did the casting directors get the right fit? They look like I had imagined, maybe like kind of a little different. So enter Laura Muccino and Sara Kazani, 2 of Italian television's most important Italian casting directors, both of which I had the opportunity to interview. That's her studio. She let me take a photo of it in Muccino's studio in Rome right before the pandemic shut things down. And the more I read about their casting process, the more fascinated I became. For one, they're exceptional at finding the authentic face. And here's a few of the faces that they've discovered. So they discovered these 2 from Gomorrah as well. Esposito was in a small gang thing earlier, but it had a teeny part. She picked, that's a fun process we could talk about later. So they find this kind of authentic face, which is a dictum frequently handed down to them by the showrunners with whom they've worked. So using My Brilliant Friend as a case study, I'd like to look at the understudied arena of casting, particularly in relation to creation of this kind of authentic stardom of non-professional performers. Indeed, I am at the very beginning of my new book called Casting Stardom, which, and this is a picture of Muccino, and that's Muccino, and that's Kazani next to her, and they're casting My Brilliant Friend there. So this new book, which will become a large-scale project on casting practices in the US and Italy, with particular attention paid to Italian TV that's exported abroad. So in turn, in drawing from personal interviews with Muccino and Kazani, I consider their epic search for these 4 non-professional child and adolescent girl performers who made the characters from the novel come to life. In particular, I engage with performances of feminine adolescents, as these performances relate to the projection's desire to represent an authentic experience of youth in post-war Italy that's exported to transnational audiences. And here's some of the billboards in Manhattan and Hollywood that were used to promote the series. First, a brief note on casting. According to casting studies scholar Kristen Warner, casting is a vital process because casting directors are in such close contact, frequently the first point of contact, and are repositories for important cultural notions of race, ethnicity, and sexuality. She says, casting is important but highly under-researched because despite the willingness of scholars to interrogate the ideological content of representations available on television, they have expended relatively little effort to penetrate beyond the final product, to examine the process by which actors come to inhabit these roles and how these industrial practices, and that's what I'm super interested in, transfer the dynamics from the street to the screen. And I find it fascinating that the face behind the actual face is frequently out of the picture. As made clear by past president of the Casting Society of America, Richard Hicks, He explains casting directors are frequently shortchanged in terms of creative respect. He says, the job is so dynamic and hard to pin down, so rife for areas in which other people can take credit for it. And frequently the person who takes credit for it is the director. And I've heard many directors say, I chose that person, I found that person. But if you ask the casting director, they didn't meet that person until a year and a half later, until the process was much more evolved. And casting directors are integral to the success of a film, TV show, or theatrical production. And they're working on like kind of the front lines in coordination with directors and showrunners. However, there's no Academy Award for casting. There isn't any category. A lot of casting directors are lobbying for an Academy Award category. According to director Tom Donahue, casting is a female-driven profession. And Rana Kress notes that the Academy still sees casting directors as secretaries. Rana Kress is a very popular, or very well-known, well-regarded female casting director. But they're considered secretaries without a function. And the gendered practices of casting are particularly interesting, I think, when considering casting's historical evolution. Earlier Hollywood casting was considered male dominant. Think of the casting couch, which is just a metaphor for sexual harassment. In that the preponderance of casting directors in the US and Italy are women, gender is also a key factor. So as of last week, as far as I could tell, 78% of Italian casting directors are women, as listed on the Chi Siamo page of the Italian Union of Italian Casting Directors Group. And a recent search of the Casting Society of American members reveals that 80% of CSA members are women or have female gendered names. And as discussed by Erin Hill, there's a bunch now. Women casting directors are still struggling for recognition, even though female casting directors, Hill says, reformulated post-studio casting into the women's creative field it is today. And this slide here includes several important Hollywood casting directors. Carmen Cuba, where's Carmen Cuba? Oh, she's right there. She did Stranger Things, and April Lester, Kim Coleman, Linda Lowry, Jennifer Houston, and others, of course, together with Muccino and Kazani. The reason why, again, revealing Hill, that like the contemporary field of casting is still thought of as women's work, derives, for example, from a studio system that is historically, and this is the case in Italy and the US, historically privileged the contributions of men while downplaying those of women, pushed women to do more for less credit, and created Hill says, a work culture that developed around feminized labor. And all of these circumstances make it difficult for women casting directors to kind of break out of the cycle of gendered labor that dominates the profession. Although you see here many of, I picked like celebratory moments where they're kind of recognized for their work. And when I asked Kazani and Muccino if they had to fight to receive credit for their work, they answered that while this was semi-true and definitely was in the past, both My Brilliant Friend and Gomorrah really focused attention on casting, as I'll discuss now in relation to the authentic casting in the series. So the series authenticity is a key feature of the vast majority of Anglophone and Italian reviews, which make mention of the use of Neapolitan dialect and the casting of non-professionals, which contribute to this process of manufacturing authenticity, this authentic experience from the novels. And I won't read all of these, but for example, and you can find out if you Google authentic, it's millions, not millions, but tons of reviews are out there. Notably, the show is shot in Neapolitan dialect to make it as authentic as possible to the books. This authentic take, the first Neapolitan novel, is the most honest and vivid portrait of the lives of young girls ever brought to TV. And these comments refer principally to casting and performance. I love this quote. In a throwback effort to authenticity, producers are looking for amateur child actors, 2 sets of girls in 8 and 15-year-old iterations, and then a large Annie-esque supporting cast of hard-knock lifers. Or, in case you haven't noticed by now, the directors of My Brilliant Friend are all about authenticity, so their casting process should be no different. Clear in reviewer and fans' reactions to the series, the stakes for getting it right are really high. And I think that we can talk about, Elena Ferrante is a pseudonym, no one knows who she is, so there's whole debates around authenticity around the novel's author as well. For she, him, her, they, we don't know who the author is. Although there's lots of theories. A striking amount of criticism on the series references the series' near-realist qualities, or precursors. Director Saverio Costanzo compares the series' elaborate casting process to the plot of Visconti's Bellissima, a film that foregrounds female performance and precarity and the potential perils of casting. And the critical discourse of L'Amica Geniale's neorealist legacy brings up, as film and media studies scholar Catherine Arra argues in her discussion of the non-professional child performer, she says the legitimating label of neorealism. So if something's neorealist, it's already good or better than other things. And the vast amount of reviews of My Brilliant Friend that emphasize the series' realistic elements, authenticity, or neorealist legacy further underline how Italian cinema has been exported abroad in a more limited way. My Brilliant Friend focuses emphasis on poverty, access to education, physical and sexual violence, and physical and mental abuse. And this focus on the series' kind of serious issues places My Brilliant Friend in line with other serious film and TV series that found international audiences. And I'm particularly interested in the casting of the series as related to the so-called authenticity of its youthful characters and the actors who interpret them, who find themselves, and that's the Italian title, their translation there, between the dream of Hollywood and the shadow of Gomorrah. This transnational status of the four actors also applies to the casting, reception, and fandom around Lila and Leno. I asked Kazani and Muccino if their casting practice was at all influenced by the status of My Brilliant Friend as a co-production, and whether they chose actors who could best represent 1950s Italy to a broad audience. So if they were really thinking about how this would be exported. Muccino responded that their choices were not at all influenced by how American audiences might imagine the characters. She said it was kind of funny, who maybe saw them as prettier, more folkloristic. Instead, they relied upon instinct backed by an incredible amount of labor on behalf of the production and casting teams. So in casting, and this is a really big deal when this was on in a New York Times article, like I was like, an Italian TV series is in the New York Times, that's a big deal. And in casting the four key faces of My Brilliant Friend, Muccino, Kazani, and crew interacted with over 9,000 non-professional female children and adolescents over a period of 7 months, all of whom were required to be from in and around Naples and to speak Italian Neapolitan dialect. In Muccino's words, to find the four girls and adolescents of My Brilliant Friend, we saw, I said 9,000 kids. It was a huge undertaking. It took us months and we're still in shock because the 15 of us were all scattered all over Naples, searching in every school. And also a casting team of 15 is massive. They're usually way, way smaller. One critic dubs the casting process epic and notes that it was akin to Gone with the Wind search for Scarlett O'Hara. And the casting call for the series declares, we will meet children, girls, and boys exclusively for Campania who have not yet come to a similar casting call. The call for the second series said more or less the same thing, but they were allowed to have tattoos because I guess they could take the time to cover them up. But I thought that was funny. That was the only thing that changed between the two series calls. This casting process is similar to the early Hollywood casting and neorealistic casting patterns called face cut casting, where the director procured actors wherever he could, happened to be shooting his film, right? And Muccino says when she's casting, even though you're not told to, you just think of the face first. It's just impossible not to think of the face. The accent was always kind of on the face. In an article titled The Faces of Ferrante, Miranda Popke puts forth that Muccino and Kazani got the faces right. And this quote is kind of mean. They could have populated Lenu's neighborhood with, my God, such faces. Oh, and they populated with, oh my God, such faces. Sloppier and saggier, more wrinkled and more weathered, and more crooked than many American readers will have imagined for these characters. She goes into detail about how bedraggled, wild, and infirm, in particular the women look, noting that Muccino and Kazani understand what poverty looks like. Popke's emphasis on the choices of faces that express an authentic experience of 1950s Neapolitan, it's on this idea of Neapolitan destitution. And the burden of corporeal decay is placed primarily upon the women surrounding Lena and Leno, who in the books and the series are beaten, mentally unstable, and subjugated to the men in their lives. And one particular challenge in casting My Brilliant Friend is locating two different sets of non-professionals who would be credible and also visually balanced with the series' extensive cast. In casting the series, a lot of it came down to luck, as noted in this Vanity Fair piece. The 4 stars they chose had no professional acting experience. 15-year-old Gaia Gerace, who plays the older Lila, is the only one who'd ever taken acting classes. 16-year-old Margarita Mazzucco, who plays Team Lenu, auditioned after someone handed her a flyer at school. 11-year-old Elisa Del Genio, younger Lenu, accompanied her brother to an audition and was chosen. While he was rejected for looking too Nordic and blonde, he's still apparently very unhappy about that. And 12-year-old Ludovica Nasti, who plays the younger version of Lilo in savage intensity, said she approached the audition as if it were a game. So typically, a non-professional actor adds a sense of authenticity, as audiences are not distracted by familiar faces with star casting. And in particular, with non-professionals cast locally, can represent kind of the lived vitality of an area. And this is even more so with the child non-professional, who can be considered a blank slate and who just gushes realism and emotion. So unlike star casting, which lends this visibility and status to a product while drawing in viewers, the child performer becomes a kind of star attraction, and Catherine O'Ross says, on the festival circuit, an object of curiosity and a marker of authenticity to a cinephile audience. And my brilliant friend premiered at the Venice Film Festival, and these are the child and adolescent performers kind of on the circuit at the time. I'll just briefly conclude by discussing promotional materials around the series that foreground Gerace and Mazzucco's status as non-professionals. Clarissa Capellani's 2018 documentary, La Mia Amica Geniale, or in English, My True Brilliant Friend, which now you can watch on Amazon, focuses on Gerace and Mazzucco and how they prepared to play Leila and Lenu, their experiences while filming the series aftermath, etc. The English transition of the title with the addition of true stresses authenticity, in this case, authentic friendship. Much of the documentary focuses on their on-screen friendship and on how in the series documentary in real life they kind of perform girlhood in slumber parties, etc. The documentary helps to promote the series through the focus on female adolescent behavior and builds upon their social media presence. And Mazzucco is the only one who refuses to accept my request for friending me on Instagram. I follow all the others and keep up to date with them. But she's also the quietest of it. She's the least to go out into the limelight and things like that. So My True Brilliant Friend represents how childishness and adolescence are coached and performed in and around the series and received by audiences and fans, and kind of talks about how child performers are frequently overdetermined by those who surround them. Mazzucco's overdetermination is made clear in exchange with Costanzo, who's the director, who attempts to coach her on how to get into character. And I just want to play this really short clip because the coaching of non-professionals is super interesting and important to how kind of the product kind of comes out in the end. So just listen to what he says her and just watch her express her facial expressions while he's talking to her and her body language.
Ma se succede, anche mai mentorita mi viene autista. Oggi mi hanno fatto.
È più semplice ma molto più difficile il tuo lavoro riuscire a essere protagonista senza esserlo. Lei deve lavorare proprio su delle sfumature di recitazione paurose, però almeno c'è il testo. Tu devi fare la stessa cosa ma invisibile, senza snodi, senza appigli, cioè un lavoro molto più complicato. L'approccio deve essere quello di altruismo, di volere bene veramente il personaggio di vita, di capirne il peso e la responsabilità di essere così. Capito? Cioè l'approccio umano, prendi una vacanza a se stessa Margherita, prendi una vacanza, dalle difese ciniche che metti, prendi una vacanza, vedrai un viaggio straordinario da fare.
It's kind of harsh. So this interaction between director and actor underlines kind of, in the words of Catherine Driscoll, kind of difficult negotiations and performances of feminine adolescence. And I'll play this slide in a second. I mean, you could kind of see how Amatsuko, the blonde, is kind of sitting there like that. Jarache, who's much more of a natural, is constantly staring and she's watching and she's taking everything in, but Margarita's like, what's going on? So it kind of underlines these difficult negotiations and performances of feminine adolescence as these performances relate to a desire for this kind of representation of authenticity. And in this example, I think Matsuko, the blonde's authenticity, comes at the cost of her self-abnegation. And these are some really interesting photos promoting the series of the four on Instagram, where they're definitely like performing youth, they're performing femininity, they're performing adolescence. In My True Brilliant Friend, and also in interviews and red corporate appearances featuring the quartet, it's clear that the child actor's self-presentation is kind of conditioned by this transnational film TV industry, which places young actors in situations that are profitable for the product and potentially perilous for the girl. And this sense of precarity is clear in these two images, which are probably the two most famous from the first season of the series. In the first, you have headless girls running towards a threat, or from an enemy, or in this one towards an enemy, they switched. Or in the other, they appear kind of listless and glum as they read. And precarity is etched on their faces and bodies, and the sense of imminent peril recalls Costanzo's assertion. He says, Naples is an open-air theater, probably to defend themselves from violence, they always had to wear masks. Everyone there is an actor. And knowing a bit about the family lives of some of the four female actors, in particular Matsuko, who lives in in Naples' most wealthy neighborhood, this is kind of a loaded claim. And Costanzo's remark on kind of authentic peril or growing up on the streets of Naples translates into an authentic performance of poverty, resonates from this comment by co-producer Miele. We couldn't imagine American actresses playing Italian schoolgirls in poor areas of Naples in the 1950s. And I find that really interesting based on the earlier comment about these really wealthy actors. In my discussion of L'Unica Geniale, I hope to explore such loaded claims regarding the mechanisms by which an authentic Italy is exported to transnational audiences. If Miele claims the team could not imagine American actresses in the role of Lila and Leno, how could they imagine wealthier Italians doing so? In the end, it comes back to the face, as Muccino explains. When I asked how they prepared for the casting process, Muccino excitedly responded that Kazani was the queen of the mood board. She elaborated, luckily, we were working with a period in history right after the Second World War. We began looking at photographs, cinema, art. Muccino said that her mother was born in 1944 Naples, and they took all of the mother's photo albums and included faces that were truly theirs, or those. Muccino points out that they were confronted with the challenge of finding faces that corresponded to the characters who had entered kind of the collective imaginary of the reader. Hence, they spent a lot of time researching the appearances of faces of the epic, thinking of the thinness of the post-war period, which underlines how casting producers are also cultural producers. In one reviewer's opinion, Del Genio and Nasti have the unforced naturalism of the best juvenile neorealist stars. And ultimately, I would like to think that My Brilliant Friend's casting process and the reception of it is anchored in a post-war neorealistic aesthetic that has a very proven transnational appeal. And that's it. And I'm happy to take any questions or chat about the Mafia.
I'll run around for you.
So I have a lot of questions, but
I see your hand.
let's start with you.
Thank you for your talk. I just have a question about this question of authenticity. I mean, it strikes me that part of what they're doing is it's a global TV brand. They're selling an idea of authenticity, and commodifying authenticity, which seems to suggest. I imagine you've thought about this a lot, but have they thought at all about? There's no such thing as authenticity. It's really just something to be sold, and especially when this claim is being made about children. like, there's a perversity to that.
Mhm.
That is, well, I'll leave it there, but like, is that even, what's the kind of capitalist calculus around authenticity through children?
Yeah, no, that's a huge question. And my one of the things that I really like to think about is we never know how much these people are paid.
Yeah.
So it's really, really hard to find how much, and especially these are, with like the neo-realist stars, that like, were they even paid anything whatsoever? Were they just doing it because it was fun? I'm trying really hard to figure out how much these guys were paid in the first season, just to see, how much. And that's one of the questions of exploitation of child labor, and especially non-professional child labor. And how much, there's all sorts of interviews with the parents, and this isn't really talking to your question, but the parents really want to get them there. They really want to get them through the auditions. They'll lie if they didn't get into one, they didn't pass one. They'll go to the next school and say that they go to that school. So they really want them to like break out. So that's one thing that I find super problematic about how to protect child performers, right? And also the relationship that they have with the industry as they enter the industry. I think if you look at the question of how aware are they, I think it depends on who that they are. What I have noticed when you look at a lot of film festivals and you have these people interviewing the kids, it seems like they're totally aware of how they're using the kids to get what they want, and how they're using the kids to have them speak to their sense of, I am from this neighborhood, and to get them to feel incredibly uncomfortable. There's some Venice interviews with the younger two where I'm so uncomfortable, I'm almost shaking, because the interviewer he's really trying to get at them, right? And they're sitting there and they're trying to be good, but you could tell they're about ready to cry. So I think that's something that comes up a lot. And but I also, you have Costanzo and Miele. I think they really believe that authenticity exists, that they are creating this authentic, this is authentic Naples, and we're going to export it abroad. So it's a great question, and it is something I think about all the time, especially with relationship to organized crime, and what's authentic and what's not. So a great question. Thank you.
Thank you. With respect to the depth and the complexity of what you've shared with us today, I have kind of a broad question about film more broadly. Because it's not every day that an undergraduate gets to ask a question of a world-class professor of film. What is it about the anti-hero that we encounter in Gomorrah, that we encounter in television everywhere, and especially in crime, stories of crime? What is it about the anti-hero that's oddly appealing to morally virtuous people, that's appealing to everyday people? Why is it that we're so captivated by the Don Drapers of the world?
Yeah.
Or
I saw you nod when I said Don Draper. I think it was you who
yes,
nodded.
ma'am.
Yeah. How much time do you have? Because I can talk about. So when I started the book on sympathetic perpetrators, I played with that idea for a few years, and I'm fascinated by it. And I spent a lot of time literally with the diagram. One of the things I almost thought I had to do is go do a degree in neuroscience, right? Because I knew I needed some sort of interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary skill set. So instead, I just read everything that my colleagues did and tried to borrow it. And what I came up with was this thing of you could call it the sympathetic perpetrator or the anti-hero identikit. And there's, about 20 separate reasons that might, lead people to this conclusion of, if a criminal anti-hero shows up at my door. So if Ciro DiMarzio shows up at my door, knocks on the door, I'm going to scream and call the cops, right? But if I invite him regularly into my home, regularly scheduled intervals, whether it's binge watching or every Sunday night, right? And that's that distinct is what's the difference? Like how could you kind of cognitively come to terms with that? And there's been some really good work by by American television scholars and film scholars. The first was by a guy named Murray Smith, and he has this theory of imaginative slumming. So you're slumming, but it's imaginary. I mean, most people, unless you're a sociopath or a psychopath, understand the difference between fiction and reality, right? So you could, break free from your life and go there and imagine, have fun with this, but also know that you're going to get up and like walk the dog at 6 a.m. and have your coffee and all that stuff. But it's a great question. I think there's, and if you're interested, send me an email because I could send you some really fun reads there's this one essay about cannibals, gangsters, parasites, and something else, and why we go towards people who we know are morally reprehensible. And Tony Soprano kind of broke the mold with this. This is when people really started talking about it, especially because, he's like not the most good-looking man in the world. He's really mean to people, but people are just, anyways, but I could go on forever, but it's a super interesting question. Yeah. But
actually, then I'd like to piggyback on that. So do you think that Tony Soprano created Tony Soprano created the first kind of example, and the Italian, Gomorrah, Subura based their anti-hero on that model, you think?
Yeah, he maybe I'll talk into this.
Yeah.
Tony Soprano is super interesting because when the show was cast, David Chase cast James Gandolfini totally by chance. James Gandolfini historically never liked to go to interviews. He suffered from a lot of anxiety. He really felt uncomfortable kind of in a casting call. And he missed the first one. He finally went and he was shocked that he got the part. And he said, I never thought they'd cast me. I thought they would not cast James, what's his name? George Clooney, but maybe an Italian George Clooney. So he really, and so I think that idea of Tony Soprano, he, because he was kind of the everyman, and it just went global that he was like the prototype, and that what Italians did is they made him good looking. Yeah, it's a great question. And the dear departed James Gandolfini really marked a change. And that's when HBO came out in the late 90s. It was specifically to break the mold in TV programming. Yeah, that's great.
And now the anti-heroes are good looking, like Dexter.
Yeah. Oh, and Dexter's coming back.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I'm very excited about that.
I know.
Yeah, I wonder, what's the average age of the person who watches a movie like Subura or Gomorrah in the U.S.?
I couldn't hear the last part.
What?
Yeah.
What's the average age of the people who watch these series? In the
I know the
US?
demographics in Italy much better than I know in the United States. It's hard to get, Subura doesn't share any of their data whatsoever. Subura, Netflix doesn't share any of their data. But I don't know the average age. I would guess that it's, my students, whenever I teach Gomorrah and Subura, they watch it all. So, but that's just because it's, they were there, they start binge watching it and they watch it. But I'm assuming it's like mid-20s and up, if I were to guess. I don't know.
I would have imagined much older, simply because I know a lot of youngsters who hate to watch movies with subtitles. And especially if they have to listen to a movie in a foreign language and it's in a dialect, it's a challenge. So I understand that the images speak for themselves.
Yeah.
The imagery is so important. But I really wonder, is it really the public who is so young that is watching these series?
Well, both HBO Max and Netflix allow you to choose whatever language you want to watch it in, and it's dubbed. So all my students just dub it in English, even though I told them, I asked them very politely not to.
Then that
Yeah.
explains
To hear
it
the
all.
Italian.
That explains it all.
Yeah. No, and that's
I had no
one of the
idea.
reasons that
I had
Netflix
no idea.
is so successful in home countries is because you don't have to read subtitles. Everything's dubbed. Yeah. No, because Gomorrah is really dark, both in terms of content, but also visually. Like it's dark, like black, and so it's really hard to read the subtitles and to watch what's going on. It's confusing, I think. So I'm like, please keep the subtitles on and watch in Italian. And they're like, yeah, sure.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Could you talk about what Luke mentioned with authenticity, but in terms of nationalism, I'm really interested in the tension between you have to, what did he say? you have to take a vacation from yourself,
Mhm.
and we only can have Italians.
Yeah.
So how do those two things go together?
Yeah, that's it's interesting. And one thing I didn't talk about is like the role of the acting coach. And in that scene, you don't see the acting coach there. He's like stepping in for the director, being, you know, the big director is stepping in for the acting coach. And the acting coaches, I have colleagues in Italy who work a lot on coaching, and it's something that's new to me. But apparently the coaching, there were 3 acting coaches that were assigned to each of the 2 actors to help them, since they really needed a lot of training. But in that scene, you don't see those acting coaches, which I find really interesting. You barely see it in the documentary. They like elide them from the narrative because it's like him, again, I think speaking for, you know, take a vacation from yourself, but you have to be totally yourself. That's what he's saying, like, be yourself. But she's the rich one. So I think that's one of the issues. She's a very wealthy Italian. And so I think that was her, you know, he would probably say, because you're privileged, you have to learn to live like in, you know, the area where, you know, so that's a really good question. I haven't thought of that, and I might actually incorporate that into my book, because that gets to that, I think, issue with the director speaking for others, and also for the child performer, the casting director and everything, but not acknowledging their own complicity in this like project of, yeah, that's really cool. Thank you, Amy.
But I'm also interested in the American one. You couldn't be an American actor if
Yeah.
you're taking a vacation from yourself. Why can't you take a vacation from being an American,
Yeah.
right, and become an Italian?
Yeah.
So then the element of nationalism there, it's just
Mhm.
really fascinating.
Well, and also this is if you watch the 3rd season is getting a lot of polemics because everyone's, you know, how many of you have seen The Queen? Anyone see The Queen? Okay, so, you know, they change the actors as the Queen ages, because one ages, and, you know, and it's not odd to do that. So everyone was expecting for season 3 that they'd have new actors, because they're aging a lot by season 3. It's the same too. And everyone's like, why? And no one's really, the director and the production, you know, stakeholders are saying they just get the naturalism more than anyone else was, you know, but like you really were hoping that they would cast 2 non-professionals to, you know, to incorporate the actors in season 3. So it's a similar kind of thing going on there.
I kind of like the fact that they kept the same. I didn't like the crown shift. I didn't like that.
Yeah.
I did not
Attached to
like.
the characters.
Didn't like it.
Yeah. No, and I think that's true, because now Gerace and Matsuko have star status. So they're
Yeah.
no longer non-professionals, they're stars, right? And so Gerace's and all sorts of other stuff. Mizuko's not, she's a good student and staying in the university. But yeah, I think that's really interesting. They probably help its promotion. Probably help, I don't know how to speak for them, but.
So, do you have one more question? No? Okay, well, another round of applause for Professor Renga. You are going to binge watch Gomorrah, Subura, and Millennium now tonight.
Yeah, and all the shows on Netflix, like there's Luna Park is really good. Astrological Guide, we don't know for the Broken Hearts.
Yeah. Luna Nera.
Generazione 56K.
Ma l'hai viste?